Well, welcome back. It is Super Bowl Sunday. It is February 7th, 2021. So, guess what time it is? It's time to look at how to quilt the quilt. So, I hope you'll join me. We'll look at Marianne's quilt on how we can help her out on a block, specific block, and then we'll take a look at Jill's table runner and how we might turn a modern table runner into something really fun to have. So join me. Let's first look at Marianne's quilt. Marianne sent this to me and she said, Penny, I've already finished these cream blocks, but I don't know what I want to do in these 16 patch blocks. So ideas. My response to her was, Marianne, you did a fabulous job. These are really good. Marianne quilts beautifully. When I have a 16 patch or a 25 patch, I think automatically some type of Irish chain. And I will most times do a continuous curve. This is what we'll look at for a continuous curve. So this is a continuous curve block. And many of us will pull away from those because we aren't pleased with our ability to look at the 1/4 inch. So when we look at a continuous curve, we're looking at coming out 1/4 of an inch and back in. Well, I have a trick for you that will cover that up 100% and make your quilt look really good. So let's look at continuous curves. This is a single continuous curve that I recommended for Marianne. This is what I call a double continuous curve, meaning that I came into that curve 2 times. It covers up your mistakes almost entirely. I did this on a quilt along that's provided in the past. It was a fall quilt along, and if you can see down here on this is all continuous curve. I went in at least 2 times on that. You will never see any mistakes, but it looks so intricate. So let's look at both ways. Here's our 16 patch block, and I'm going to try to make it look a little bit more head-on. This is how we do it. On this side, we are going to close this edge on the seam. We'll close these edges, this and this, as we quilt them, and finally at the end, we'll close this edge. So we're going to start here, and there's several ways to do it. This is a somewhat easy one. We're going to stitch the seam side 1/4 of an inch away, approximately. It does not have to be exact. I'm going to try to blow this up. And we'll go across this whole area, looking where you're going and not where you're at. So you keep your eye on that 1/4 inch seam. We're going to seal. That edge is now sealed. It's down. It's done. We'll come down 1 block, stitch over, and then on each side of this seam. This is very hard to do with this pen. We'll go all the way across. Now we'll do this last one, and then we'll seal up the next seam side. We'll come down again, over, and then we'll do the seam. And I am doing this not real carefully. It would take too long. Come over, and then we'll seal up the seam or go back again. We're going to do that through to the last row. And if I had done them real good, you'd see nice, pretty circles there. These are not super bad, but okay, I'm going to come down again. Come down to the next row. Now, as I go, I'm sealing up that bottom against the seam here. That's going to be complete. When I get to here to the end, I'll seal up this side and I'm done. That's all there is to it. But it can be difficult when you're starting, identifying and keeping track on that 1/4 inch seam. So all we're going to do is come in a little bit further on each one, following the same process, but coming in a second time. Go down, we're going to go over, we're going to go up and down. Whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. Up and down. And I missed that a little bit. There, up and down. Let's make sure you get inside there. And then we're going to go follow it back. And when we finish, we'll end up with what we've got here. And it looks beautiful. So that was my suggestion for Marianne. She had actually had to go ahead and complete those a different way, but that's how I normally would do a 16 patch. Now let's go back and look at Jill's table runner. Okay, Jill, what are you doing to me, girl? This is so out of my comfort level, but I really like it. So Jill was a student of mine for several classes in Colorado, and she's super and comes up with some really neat things. So this is her table runner, and as you can tell, all of the printed fabrics are polka dots, and so it makes it much more modern. What do I do with this? So remember, the first thing I like to show is all over quilting, and you could easily take this, especially with the polka dots, and just do simple loops on this quilt. And I'll talk about the star in a minute, but we could easily do simple loops. We could also change that, and instead of loops, since we have polka dots and stars, we could do stars with the loops and the polka dots. And that would add a little variety. So if you want to do something, if you want to do something simple, those are great options. Let's look at something a little bit different than that. So one thing I thought of as I was playing and thinking is how can I divide some of these areas? And I was looking at something with straight lines and curves in the borders. So I was playing around. And that's what I do when I try to figure out designs. And then I looked at the stars. Now, because I have all of those dots, I felt like the stars really lent themselves to doing straight lines in them. And all this is, and does not look perfect, because I can't make it perfect when I'm drawing. But all I did was divide this horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, and then stitch 1/4 inch away from each of those lines in each of the 8 points. And I really like that very much. So that's something that I looked at with the stars. Now we could do different things in the stars. Here I came through with leaves. Yeah, okay. That's a little bit unclassic, or more classic. The echoing is a little bit more modern. I also did something similar to what Marianne did in her blocks, with a little bit of a different feather. That makes it slightly more classic, but I really didn't like it. So what else can I do? Well, besides the stars, I really like those stars. And you're going to think I'm crazy, and I did too. But once I did it, I liked it more and more. So Handy Quilter and several other quilters as well have put out templates with circles. Handy Quilter has redesigned this now, I believe, but you still can get the same options. And going with the all over design again, so one thing I thought of, and don't think I'm crazy, is circles throughout. So you could do this with just template plastic and drawing them and then going around them, or use something like a template where you can actually quilt inside of them, but doing circles that touch and that don't touch and that overlap throughout the whole table runner. And while I think I'm actually kind of liking it the more I look at it. It seems strange to begin with, but I think it would flow pretty good with this. Let's go on and look at another option though. So when I am looking at modern quilts, one thing I will do is try connecting lines and see what other things I can get to show up. So I went through these stars and just tried coming through each point, and I ended up with something very interesting. Again, this is just hand drawn with my Procreate, so not everything's perfect, but you can see how all of a sudden you can get squares to form between the polka dots and the stars. And so all I did was come out here and connect that intersecting area, and then did the same thing here, brought that star seam all the way out to this seam. The only thing you do have to remember is that anything on the very edge is going to get cut off. So when I come out this way, I don't want to bring it any further out than 1/4 of an inch inside of where your binding would be. So I would come to about 1/4 of an inch or so within the very edge of the quilt. But you can see how I started getting those squares, and I really, really like that. So then I took it another step, and here are the squares that come from just going out of these intersections. But then if you go further beyond that to the further outside point, so I came here and then I came in here, this one doesn't finish. But what you end up with is if you go opposite diagonals each way and then this way, you actually form that whole, the squares and portions of a square throughout this whole table runner. And it's extremely modern, stays with the theme of the runner, and I absolutely love it. And really like this for Jill. Then I still like doing these coming in 1/4 of an inch. But then I went ahead and came in 1/4 of an inch again, and Jill didn't see this. I did show part of this to Jill, but she didn't see that. And I thought, oh, how cool. Well, how about our pebbles? So coming back in between those two, coming inside of 1/4 of an inch from the seams, and then coming in again, and then going between these two with the pebbles. Ooh la la. Really, really like this. And that's what I would do if I was quilting this for Jill. So that's our table runner, our modern table runner when you do it with that. I hope you've really enjoyed looking at Marianne's 16 patches and her quilting, and at Jill's table runner. See me Wednesday for the second to last post on the Jelly Roll Race quilt designs, and then next Monday for another How to Quilt the Quilt portion. Have a super week. Bye-bye. And do enjoy the Super Bowl if you're watching it.